Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you all had a good lunch and managed to get out a bit of breath of fresh air. We're going to move from a very much a UK perspective, which we had this morning, into more of an international realm. And the first of the two sessions this afternoon, we've got three speakers. First up, we're going to have Dianna Kopansky from the UN Environment Programme, and Dianna leads the Global Peatlands Initiative. Then we're going to move to Peter Coleman. Peter works for UK Government's Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And then our third speaker is Ashton Berry, and Ashton Berry represents BirdLIFE International. So a really good kind of diverse range of speakers, I think, covering quite a range of topics and subject areas. After we've run through our speakers, and they're all here, we're then going to move into a live Q&A session. So I think that if those of you who were here this morning will know by now that you'll see a little bar on the right-hand side of your window there. There's one called chat and there's one called Q&A. So what we'd like you to do is to post your questions for our speakers into the Q&A section, and then we'll be able to direct our speakers to answering those questions. We've got about 20 minutes at the end of the session to do that. And you don't need to wait until the end. So if something occurs to you during one of our presenters' talks, then please just post your question as and when it occurs to you. Okay, best of luck to our speakers. And I'll first of all hand over to Dianna Kopansky.
Good day, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Dianna Kopansky, and on behalf of the United Nations Environment Programme, I have the honor to lead the Global Peatlands Initiative. It's a partnership working to save peatlands as the world's largest terrestrial organic carbon stock. Peatlands matter for the climate. Estimates suggest that while peatlands cover only 3% of global land surface area, they store over 500 billion tons of carbon. That's as much carbon as in all terrestrial biomass, and twice as much carbon as in all the world's forests. Current greenhouse gas emissions from drained or damaged peatlands, like this one in the picture here, are estimated to be 5% of all emissions caused by human activity. If the world has any hope of keeping the global average temperature increase below 2 degrees Celsius, then urgent action must be taken to keep peatlands healthy and wet and keep that carbon locked in peatlands where it is in the ground. At the same time, already drained or degraded peatlands must be re-wet and restored to halt the significant emissions they release in the atmosphere. Peatlands matter for people around the world. In addition to the role they play for our climate, they house rare, vital biodiversity. They contribute to water quality regime. They provide a multitude of other ecosystem services that support our livelihoods and our well-being. Peatlands matter for the planet. More than 180 countries have peatlands, but we're only just starting to understand their role in both water cycling and climate change, and in our efforts to curb it. You may have heard the news that in 2017, an international team led by UK scientists mapped the world's largest tropical peatland in the Cuvette Centrale in the Congo Basin. Estimates say that it contains more than 30 gigatons of carbon. That's as much carbon as the US economy emits in 15 years. Here's an aerial photo of the Congo Basin Cuvette Centrale peatlands. It's courtesy of Roberta Bondar. She's a Canadian astronaut, and she got the picture from NASA. The Global Peatlands Initiative is an international partnership formed at the end of 2016 after the crisis of the Indonesian fires. It started as a partnership of 13 founding members. One of them is the IUCN UK Peatland Programme, And in less than 4 years, we've grown to almost 40 international partner organizations and 4 major tropical peatland countries of Indonesia, Republic of Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Peru. Our diversity is an asset, both in partners' peatland experience and for the regions they work in and where they come from. And our partners are committed to working together to improve the conservation, restoration, and sustainable management of peatlands globally, based on local experience, built on the best science and practice available. And the IUCN Peatlands program has and continues to be an exceptional core partner. You're leading the way in inspiring others to act for healthy peatlands while exemplifying the true spirit of collaboration that the initiative is built upon. Keeping peat carbon in the ground is crucial if the world is to meet the 2-degree target. To achieve this, every country and its citizens need to undertake business unusual so that global carbon emissions reach net zero by 2050. That's a date just around the corner. In order to do this, the Global Peatlands Initiative identified 4 priority work areas. Each partner is working together in their areas of strength to know where peatlands are and how they're changing, to identify productive uses and drainage-free livelihoods that help protect them and move them towards their sustainable management. We're working with countries to develop and put in place policies, laws, and institutional frameworks that account for the uniqueness of peatlands and the need for urgent action to avoid developmental threats. And we're working together to identify financial solutions and instruments and working with both the private and public sectors so that they can invest in healthy peatlands now and in the future. We work with countries to help them make well-informed decisions and to develop management and policy options that minimize impacts on people and the environment and avoid dangerous social and climatic tipping points linked to peatland loss and degradation. We promote South-South and triangular cooperation, bringing science to policy and facilitating peer-to-peer exchange. We bring best practice to their attention so that they can choose to scale up and improve action for healthy peatlands. The Global Peatlands Initiative has been quite ambitious. We've taken risks. We've been bold, and as a result, we've achieved some unexpected results. For example, our Smoke on Water publication pushed the governments of Indonesia, DRC, and the Congo to commit to work together to protect the Cuvette Central peatlands. Next, we helped establish the International Tropical Peatland Center in Indonesia. And GPI's South-South collaboration approach has not only been recognized within UNEP, but also across the entire UN system as a best practice to advance the achievement of SDG 15, Life on Land. We need to inspire people and countries to act, and by raising our voices together, we've been able to influence some of the most important global environmental policy making fora. Peatlands people are passionate, and when we share what we know about the importance of peatlands and link it to the best science, people do listen. It's undeniable that we need healthy peatlands for our health and our climate future. Healthy peatlands also contribute to a number of key multilateral environmental agreements. If we want to accelerate global action on peatlands and see real tangible results, then collaboration across multilateral environmental agreements is essential. The sooner we build programmatic synergies and work together, the faster we'll reach our global goals. We're making headway with policy coherence internationally, inspiring more and more countries to develop or update their peatland policies and strategies in line with the Peatlands resolutions. The United Nations Environmental Assembly in 2019 adopted a resolution on the conservation and sustainable management of peatlands. It's a commitment by all member states to give greater emphasis to the conservation, sustainable management, and restoration of peatlands worldwide. You may not be aware, but the lead co-negotiator for the resolution was actually from the UK. And along with the Indonesian leads, Kasia did an incredible job building on the resolutions of the IUCN and Ramsar as we work to knit together the elements to provide clear environmental and a global push for peatlands health. The UK has been informing a number of policy discussions. For example, in 2019, Emma shared UK experiences at the German-hosted Best Practice Exchange workshop. It was on European peatland strategies, and experts and peatland stakeholders from over 12 European Union member states and other European countries came together to discuss why and how to develop a national peatland strategy. UK scientists have also been sharing their knowledge and experience during Global Forum. Here's Sue Page sharing why peatlands are vital for food security. The Global Landscapes Forum. You actually might be in this picture on the top left. It was taken in April 2019 when we started to work together with the UK peatland experts on a new initiative to combine data across studies and sites to better inform peatland policy and practice. Through facilitated dialogues, this work has helped to promote collaborative thinking and move towards setting global standards for research through the identification of core common outcomes. We first discussed this in Newcastle, and then Mark and Dylan replicated the approach at the International Tropical Peatlands Center in Indonesia. And more recently, the Global Peatlands Initiative held a series of 4 virtual workshops together with the Water Institute on Canada's peatlands towards a national assessment. These workshops have laid the groundwork for actions and activities for a collaborative national assessment of Canada's peatlands. They're going to be starting in 2021. And the growing network of Canadian scientists is extremely excited to connect and learn from the UK experts, as they're also asking very similar questions and working together on similar challenges. Mark Reed joined us during our last webinar to share the core common outcomes work and also invite Canadian researchers to join the Global Peatlands Initiative Researchers Working Group. The UK peatlands community has a lot to celebrate with the results you've achieved, and you have a lot to share with the world on what peatlands protection, restoration approaches, what they look like, what frameworks, incentives, rules, and regulations are needed, and likely so much more. You've created and are doing an excellent job leading unique working groups, for example, the Eurosite Peatlands Restoration Working Group, led by Paul Lidbetter from the North Pennines AONB Partnership. You guys have excellent resources. You've collected them, and you've probably got tons more. So the world really does need to hear from you. As we turn the corner on 2020 to build back better, there are a number of important decision-making or influencing events coming up where we would love to be able to highlight your experience and your deep knowledge on peatlands management and restoration. And in order to build back better, we need a suite of approaches from conservation and protection, restoration action, sustainable livelihoods. They'll really need to be a balanced approach, considering the importance of peatlands for climate, biodiversity, water, resilience. We need to push every opportunity to prioritize peatlands action. Building back better will also rely on peatlands economic evidence and approaches. And the work that the UK has done most recently to launch the UK Land Carbon Registry, combining the Peatland Code and the Woodland Carbon Code, is incredible. That's going to provide huge incentives and a learning opportunity for other countries around the world to be able to work on climate action and nature-based solutions. And early next year, the Global Peatlands Initiative will start work on a peatlands economics paper, and it's going to be able to feature this exemplary work of the Peatland Code, Woodland Code, and the combination of the two. We'll also be looking forward to the content from the UK and leadership from this group as we work on the Global Peatlands Assessment. And in 2021, we also have the opportunity to strongly place peatlands as a priority ecosystem for action, as a nature-based solution, and in the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. In 2019, you must know that the United Nations General Assembly proclaimed 2021 to 2030 as the UN Decade on Ecosystems Restoration. The decade is a rallying call for the protection and revival of ecosystems all around the world for the benefit of people and nature. And the decade aims to foster a restoration culture and scale it up across the planet. to show successful initiatives to stop degradation and improve restoration and protection. It's also going to try to build a solid portfolio of sustainable production and impact investment. And the Global Peatlands Initiative worked really hard to secure peatlands as one of the priority ecosystems highlighted in the decade. You can see it circled here in blue. So I'm here to urge you to also raise your voice for peatlands as a priority ecosystem with the nature-based solutions dialogues and also within the decade. The UK had solid restoration and conservation experience to share, and the UN Decade is a huge venue for visibility, inspiration, and also for collaboration. So I really do look forward to identifying opportunities to strategically highlight the UK's peatland thematic work and your regional successes. And honestly, through collaboration and awareness raising, the Global Peatlands Initiative and UK Peatlands community could really enable other countries to take action and really understand how peatlands are a priority ecosystem for climate action, for biodiversity, and it has a rightful strong place within the UN Decade on Ecosystems Restoration. We know that to have transformative impact, we need all sectors involved and inspired to act, especially the private sector and the public. And it's wonderful to see that communities in the UK are already activating around the decade, as you can see from this picture here. We also really need all hands on deck. For this, we need inspiration. I'd love to share with you these two beautiful pictures by award-winning Irish nature photographer Tina Claffey. Through her work and her outreach on social media and in the global fora, she's really motivating others to see the beauty and importance of peatlands, not just for their carbon, but for their unique biodiversity through this macro lens. And to activate and inspire the public, in October we tried something a little different, placing peatlands as a priority ecosystem in the Wild for Life campaign. We worked with contributions from around the world, including many of you from the UK, and the team developed an immersive journey to the peatlands, an epic nature-based solution. It's an interactive map shown in 9 languages, and it allows the discovery of the magic and mystery of 11 ancient peatlands across the planet and how they serve humanity in a myriad of ways. So for many of us that can't travel now, the journey allows us to travel virtually and also to learn and discover peatlands around the world. We'll be working to expand this map to even include more interesting peatlands from across the world, so please do get in touch if there is one near and dear to you that you can help us feature. We've really seen the impact of South-South collaboration, of genuine South-South collaboration. But for peatlands, we need North-North collaboration. We need triangular collaboration. And for that, we really need the knowledge and the experience of the UK. The UK needs to play a key and central role in peatlands, understanding in peatlands, inspiration, and also restoration. Here's a link to the journey. They're going to play the video after I finish my presentation. But I really just want to say, honestly, the peatlands community has a lot to be proud of. Your approaches and experience are super important, and they have been inspiring other nations. They've been inspiring me. I've been sharing your experience, but of course, I don't have access to it all. We really do recognize that through collaboration and exchange, we can all learn more. And we'll be able to keep doing more to beat the global challenges in front of us. You're really part of this important solution. And please do use the hashtag #PeatlandsMatter. Contact me to learn more about the initiative and the work of the United Nations Environment Program, and also have a little look at our website. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much, and I look forward to speaking with some of you in the Q&A. Thanks very much.
afternoon. I hope you're all well. Thank you to Dianna for an inspiring talk and video. I'm Peter Coleman from the UK Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and I'll be talking about the role of UK peatlands in climate mitigation. Some policy background. In 2019, the UK became the first major economy to pass into law a net zero target. One of the shortest bits of legislation, the Climate Change Act 2008-2050 Target Amendment Order 2019, modified part of the Climate Change Act by deleting 80% and substituting 100%. A trivial regulatory change, but actually has massive implications for how we decarbonise going forward. 100% is a much more stringent target and requires cross-economy action. On the 18th of November, the Prime Minister launched the 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution. This included restoration of peatlands as point 9, as one part of point 9. On the 3rd of December, you may have heard that the Prime Minister announced that the UK aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 68% between 1990 and 2030. This is a significant increase in ambition within the Paris Agreement, the UK. The Committee on Climate Change will publish their recommendation for the 6th carbon budget, that's from 2033 to 2037 on Wednesday this week. This is the first carbon budget for the UK, which is set with the net zero target in mind and therefore is a subject of great interest. On Saturday, the 12th of December, at the UN Climate Ambition Summit, the UK will give further details of our nationally determined contribution, which spell out the meaning of the 68% target for 2030. Looking further forward, in the government's response to the CCC's 2020 progress report, it was announced that a net zero strategy covering how we would achieve the 6th carbon budget and looking forward to 2050 would be published in the lead up to COP26. And of course, you'll be aware that the UK and Italy are co-hosting the 26th Conference of the Parties to the UNFCCC in Glasgow in November 2021. So a lot of quite exciting policy development in an area which needs policy development. Others may know that UK emissions of greenhouse gases fell 43% between 1990 and 2018. You can see at the top, the red line, that sector, the energy supply sector, has decreased its emissions quite substantially. Other sectors, transport, agriculture, have not had the same change in emissions over that time period and have more to do going forward. You will notice at the bottom a green line that sticks very close to zero. Actually, in places, this is negative. This is the land use sector, land use change and forestry. Currently, an emission in 2018 of minus 10 megatons. This is the only sector in the inventory currently that provides minus emissions, negative emissions, and balances out to a small degree fossil fuel use and other sources of emission. Of course, by 2050, the size of that minus number has to be equal to any remaining emissions. So looking forward, we published a few weeks ago the land use change and forestry projections. And you can see in the top left the graph of a set of scenarios out to 2050 of what policies could deliver. And you can see that actually the LULUCF removals are reducing up to 2050. This is an inevitable consequence of the current age of the forests in the UK, that they're coming up to being harvested where they're productive forestry, but that the restocking and replanting required will lead to an increase in removals in the second half of the century. And of course, it's worth being aware that the target is to achieve net zero in 2050 and thereafter. So where do peat emissions fit into the inventory? Well, currently we have 3 sources of emissions from peat soils in the greenhouse gas emission inventory. The drainage of organic soils, which is around, well, 1,700 kilotons CO2 per year, so a tiny fraction of national emissions. We've got the off-site emissions from horticultural peat, which are more substantial and reflect the oxidation of the peat extracted from sites in use, and then a small contribution from the remaining on-site emissions from horticultural peat. In the UK inventory, many peat soils, you will tell from this, are not currently included in those emission estimates or projections. We've heard from Dianna how important globally peat is as a carbon stock, and in some places a carbon sink. But as she has said, degraded peats are perhaps 4%, 5% of global emissions. You'll know the UK, you guys are much more expert on peats than I am. Has a relatively high peat area because we have relatively good conditions for accumulation of organic material. Under the Kyoto Protocol, the UNFCCC Kyoto Protocol's second commitment period, which runs from 2013 to the end of this year, so not for much longer, the UK elected to include all relevant land use activities. This includes, in Kyoto Protocol terms, wetland drainage and rewetting. The consequence of this is that from the inventory, including 2020, we will be including emissions from degraded peat under all land uses. So that's not just under wetland drainage and rewetting, but also under grazing land and cropland and forest land. Recently, the Doha Amendment, which brings the second commitment period into legal force, received its 144th instrument of acceptance and therefore passed the threshold to enter into force 90 days after the 1st of October. So just before the end of the period, it will enter into force. And there's now a couple of extra countries that have also signed up. So how do we address this need to include peatlands in our inventory in more detail? We commissioned a study from CH, now UKCH, to provide a framework. That was published in 2019 and the link is there. It's easily available. That drew on the expertise of CH, but also a range of other UK researchers. Rebecca Arts is perhaps in the audience, and some international contributions too. Key findings were 22% of peat is near natural, lowland peat emissions dominate, that non-forest peat soils emit around 17 megatons CO2 equivalent per year, which is around 3.8% of the UK current net emissions in 2018. These numbers are very uncertain. Estimates suggested it could range from 13 to 26 megatons CO2 per year, and that from 1990 up to the time of the report data, around half a megaton had been reduced in the emissions by the restoration of 95,000 hectares. The report also suggested there was significant potential for mitigation of peatlands by restoration and actions, 4 to 8 megatons per year by 2050. However, you will note that that leaves the addition of peatland in the emission a net increase in emissions in 2050. So the breakdown from that work was that cropland and intensive grassland dominate the emission sources, with over half this emission coming from those. Peat extraction is already in the inventory. And then towards the end, you'll notice near natural bog and fen are pretty much neutral or slightly removing in greenhouse gas emissions. So what can peatland mitigation deliver? Well, for net zero, we need, as I've said, the remaining sources to balance the sinks we've managed to generate by then. So we need to reduce sources across the economy, and we need to encourage sinks. Near natural peat is a greenhouse gas sink. I think there's uncertainty about how quickly that transition from source to sink is realised, and concerned that during that transition there may be issues with methane emissions that may outweigh the carbon stored. Carbon is only part of the problem, and as you'll be aware, methane is a potent greenhouse gas. So you can be a carbon sink without necessarily being a greenhouse gas sink in our terms. So we need to focus currently on emission reduction through appropriate mitigation. Those emission reduction activities need to maximise the return on investment through natural capital gains, taking into account the broad range of other benefits such as biodiversity, water storage and agricultural production. BEIS's role is to quantify the emissions across the UK, Crown dependencies and overseas territories, and encourage others to act to reduce these emissions. The policy leadership is with DEFRA or in England and for the devolved administrations in their own countries, and of course for the CD and OT governments as appropriate. We also have a role which I haven't mentioned here, which is we worked with the International Climate Fund to the UK's overseas aid to developing countries to reduce emissions in the land sector. And I think there's areas where both protecting and minimising emissions can be taken forward through that route. So how are we going forward? We have ongoing research to try to reduce the uncertainty in the estimates. Since the report was published, colleagues at CH have been working very hard with colleagues from James Hutton to review the published emission factors and make sure we have an up-to-date estimate, which has slightly changed some of the numbers. Some have gone up, some have gone down. We have a research project currently underway, which is trying to improve our estimate of the area and condition of lowland wasted peat, predominantly an English problem. We are trying to set up flux towers to measure for the first time on wasted peat the emission factors. Of course, that's been rather delayed this year due to events around the pandemic and lack of access to labs and workshops, but hopefully they'll be ready by and operating by the end of the year. And clearly over the longer time, that will give us useful data. We, with others, have contributed towards a project which the Falklands Conservation are taking forward to improve the peatland, our knowledge of the peatland extent and condition in the Falklands, with that being the most significant of the OTs and CDs from the perspective of peat coverage. We also need to work with DEFRA and the devolved administration so that when restoration projects go forward, we collect between us sufficient data to enable the project's impacts and benefits to be reflected in the emissions inventory. And that's quite a challenge given the number and detail of data that might be required. And I'm very grateful to those in the audience who are collaborating with DEFRA and the DAs to take that forward. And further, moving forward, we need to continue to consider how we can reduce that remaining uncertainty, which you can see is very substantial. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the week.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ashton Berry. I'm the Global Climate Change Program Coordinator for BirdLIFE International, and today I'm going to talk to you about nature-based solutions and biodiversity policy, and I've included a subheading, actions to address mitigation and adaptation, biodiversity loss and community resilience and wellbeing. Firstly, the definition of nature-based solutions, as you can see on the screen, the IUCN definition, actions to protect, sustainably manage and restore natural or modified ecosystems that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity offsets. I think this is a very important definition and one that's becoming industry standard. Key words from this definition we can bring out that are very important to consider: protect and restore. The protection of ecosystems and the restoration of ecosystems is a very prominent nature-based solution. and are very important to reducing biodiversity loss, but also for climate mitigation and adaptation, and has many societal benefits. Sustainable management of our ecosystems is also vitally important, bearing in mind that not all ecosystems are able to be maintained as pristine systems without human involvement. Natural or modified ecosystems, to make sure we don't focus just on natural, also modified solutions, in recognition that many systems are highly modified or modified to some extent, and provide biodiversity benefits and human well-being. It's very important to ensure we consider that by benefiting biodiversity, we also benefit human well-being. It's a very important concept to maintain. And nature-based solutions also address societal challenges, particularly in regard to climate change, very effectively. So with that definition in mind and the key words that we've drawn out of it, nature-based solutions are an umbrella concept. They cover a range of cost-effective solutions such as ecosystem protection and restoration, which I've mentioned. Ecosystem-based approaches are also underneath the umbrella of nature-based solutions and include ecosystem-based adaptation and protected areas, and tend only to focus on climate change adaptation and not mitigation, which you can see within the CBD definition of nature-based solutions. Natural climate solutions, its proponents will tell us that natural climate solutions are part of nature-based solutions, but tend to have more of a focus on mitigation. Blue-green urban design, nature-based solutions within city and urban areas, and you can see some images of blue-green urban design in the image on this slide, drainage, rooftop gardens, etc. Water-sensitive urban design, also very important in the urban city context, as are blue-green urban design, very important in enabling water infiltration into aquifers, keeping water on the land for longer, enabling sediment and nutrient to be removed from water before it reaches the sea, and enabling water infiltration into aquifers. Ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction is also a very important version of a nature-based solution. It's widely used globally with the incorporation of ecosystems into the necessity to reduce disaster risk. And agroecology is also a very important element from an agricultural perspective, looking at introducing biodiversity into agriculture for the purposes of mitigating and adapting to climate, but also increasing biodiversity. So why do we need nature-based solutions? Well, firstly, they provide co-benefits that help people and ecosystems simultaneously adapt to and mitigate the impacts of climate change. So co-benefits, and the word simultaneously, they do both things at once. We don't have time to just adapt or just mitigate or just do biodiversity. We want to do all those things at the same time. While protecting, sustainably managing and restoring biodiversity, ecosystem integrity and ecosystem services, the nature-based solutions offer all of those things at the same time. They provide a powerful mechanism to realise and take advantage of synergies between the CBD and the UNFCCC policy contexts, and bringing together the overlaps between those conventions. Nature-based solutions is an ideal tool to do that. Nature-based solutions, the science is telling us, can provide over 30% of the mitigation required to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement in keeping global average temperature from exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius. We need more science that backs this up, but nevertheless, that sort of percentage indicates that the urgent phase out of fossil fuel emissions and the rapid deployment of renewable energy cannot by themselves achieve the Paris Agreement goals without nature-based solutions. So nature-based solutions are a very important, essential component to be included within climate and biodiversity policy. Nature-based solutions need prioritisation. Different types of nature-based solutions have different levels of benefit from a biodiversity or climate perspective. For example, wetland, peatlands, forest, grassland restoration has a higher biodiversity mitigation potential benefit than does rooftop gardening. So we need to consider the types of nature-based solutions we're employing, making sure we don't bias the options that provide less biodiversity and climate mitigation adaptation benefit over others. Within the UNFCCC climate policy context, UNFCCC is very supportive of nature-based solutions. In the Madrid COP in 2019, there was an extensive array of nature-based solutions promoted within the COP. The UNFCCC supports nature-based solutions and promotes the ability of nature-based solutions to contribute to achieving or raising the ambition of nationally determined contributions that countries that are signatory to the convention must contribute towards the goals of the Paris, achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. Nature-based solutions are very effective in this way. They both apply adaptation and mitigation and can be very much used to raise NDC ambition. However, issues with the UNFCCC's forest definition and its carbon accounting rules have provided scope for perverse outcomes that can lead to biodiversity decline. So although the UNFCCC very much has adopted nature-based solutions, to realise their full potential, we need to have a look and rectify some of the loopholes within the forest definition and accounting rules. And some very good news is in the Madrid COP, in the key decision text of the agreement of the COP, paragraph 14 underlines the essential contribution of nature to addressing climate change and its impacts, and the need to address biodiversity loss and climate change in an integrated manner. Both of these underlie the ability and the potential of nature-based solutions, and the words nature and biodiversity for the very first time have appeared in this text. So we're very hopeful that we'll be able to use this as a first step towards really powerfully bringing the two conventions together under the roof of nature-based solutions. So the CBD, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, has also incorporated nature-based solutions. They're integrated into the development of the framework. They can contribute to addressing biodiversity loss and provide benefits to people, and strengthen alignment with the delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals. This is very important to make sure we align with the Sustainable Development Goals, and NBS allows us to do that. Signposting this integration into the CBD context are some of the key targets, relevant targets in the draft framework. So to target 1, ecosystems retain and conserve, is very similar to what I've already mentioned as key concept under nature-based solution. Protected areas, species recovery and conservation, down to target 7, climate change, all the way through to target 11, health and culture, are all very powerful concepts under the nature-based solutions concept. So a quick look or closer look at the language that's presented. NBS is both explicitly or implicitly mentioned within the targets of the framework. Target 1, ecosystems retain and conserve land and sea areas under spatial planning, addressing land, sea use change, retaining wilderness, and restoring degraded areas. So those two key words are retaining and restoring, very much implicitly referring to nature-based solutions, or at least nature-based solutions applied in that case. Explicitly mentioned as nature-based solutions in target 7, target 10, and again implied with the biodiversity and blue-green spaces are very important aspects of nature-based solutions. So whilst there are issues with the language of these targets, our first challenge is adoption of the term nature-based solutions. And we believe this has happened in the definition of the CBD, as you'll see down the bottom there. The CBD has adopted this definition of nature-based solutions, and you'll recognise the similarity between it and the IUCN definition. Supporters of the NBS language at the second meeting of the open-ended working group on the biodiversity framework, supporters want integration of nature-based solutions, a defined term in the CBD, as I've mentioned, into the global biodiversity framework, and you can see the countries there: Switzerland, China, Colombia, Russia, etc. Opponents of nature-based solution language prefer the use of ecosystem-based approaches because they feel it's more adequately defined, whereas nature-based solutions is slightly less clear as a concept. And you can see the countries there that are still wondering about nature-based solutions. BirdLIFE International is very supportive of nature-based solutions, and it's has adopted the 4 high-level principles to uphold and practice, including cut emissions, conserve and protect existing ecosystems, be socially responsible and be ecologically responsible. And we also have 5 nature-based solutions actions for nature and climate, which we've adopted: protect and conserve remaining carbon and biodiversity rich intact ecosystems, connect and buffer fragmented carbon and biodiversity rich sites, being good examples of the ability to protect systems, enabling degraded natural ecosystems to regrow naturally, and then active restoration as well, and protected areas, sustainable management, key concepts that we've adopted. And we've done this through a range of mechanisms, and we continue to do so. This is just 3 examples. A letter to the UNFCCC COP26 President outlining definitions and guiding principles, as I've just mentioned to you, and the need to restore nature and cut emissions via a joint letter in the New York Times, and via a paper promoting MBS in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which is due out soon, as it might have only just been released. Great, thank you very much for your time. I hope that we can. I hope that I've been used some help, and we can have some good questions in the discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay, now that was a pretty amazing set of presentations there. There's a lot of technical detail, as well as some really imaginative and inspirational presentation around the wonders and values of peatlands. So, and actually we've got quite a broad range of questions too that have come in. I noticed there's a few in the chat box too, so I'll attempt to get over to those, but focus of attention anyway is on the questions in the Q&A. So if I could come to our speakers, and I maybe just kind of start actually with a couple of questions for you all, and if you could keep your answers brief, because we've got about 15 minutes, I think. We had a kind of range of questions come in, I think largely on the back of Peter's presentation, but I'm sure Dianna and Ashton will be kind of able to respond too. So it's a general question, I think, about whether you feel that we have enough and robust data to actually know what the net benefits of near natural and damaged peatlands are, and to be able to support that reporting, and whether you kind of all feel that there are kind of key areas of future research where we need to plug some knowledge gaps. So maybe come to Peter first, because I think it largely kind of was prompted from your presentation, Peter.
Okay, well, do we have enough? No, we never have enough. The uncertainty of some of these numbers and the difference between studies is quite large. The number of studies isn't as plentiful as one would like. I think that's partly a consequence of being careful not to count twice data which is reported multiple times in different papers. I think we need to know more about the stages of restoration, and we need to know more about the impact of nutrient levels. Fens and upland peats will be very different. And you've heard from Daphne earlier about improving our sense of where we have peatlands and what condition they're currently in. So I think there's a lot to be done.
And you mentioned, Peter, that there were a couple of kind of ongoing bits of research that your department's involved with. What's the timescales for publication of those?
Publication might be a different thing. Completing them, we are, as you may have heard earlier in the year, we only got a 1-year spending review settlement. Theoretically, therefore, our money stops in March 21. We expect to get a longer spending review settlement during the next financial year. I don't believe there's much value in a 1-year emission factor because intraannual variability is quite large in fluxes. Sorry, I'm told. Therefore, I think we would want most of our emission factor measurements to be quite multi-annual. So I'm not expecting really to have better data on emission factors until maybe 2024, 25. The activity data, the area mapping of the wasted peat, or at least the wasted peat condition work that is should have happened, but has been delayed due to the inability to get out in the field and contact people and get permission onto sites and all the problems with the pandemic, which I'm sure are affecting everybody internationally. We would hope to have that done. We'd hope to see the results by March, I think, contractually. There may be issues which mean we don't actually get the results until later. I hope not. So this is not contract management guidance to the contractors. And we would probably publish that with emission factor data altogether, but there may be opportunities for us to publish that separately, I'm not sure. So we tend to publish at the end of projects, once they've been through appropriate peer review, etc. So I think it's several years before we'll have much new to say, certainly not before, I don't know, 2023. So.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Just jump over to you, Dianna, if that's okay. So from your kind of global overview perspective, are there any kind of real barriers, I think, to kind of moving forward, just in terms of knowledge gaps that you think?
Absolutely. I think that most countries are indeed struggling with these aspects of emissions factors and calculations. And I think that, you know, especially when you have such diverse ecosystems, which you're dealing with, and you don't necessarily have the infrastructure. So I think that from the global perspective, we're working as a Global Peatlands Initiative to really try to harmonize and identify some core common outcomes that can be monitored, and researchers from around the world can start to gather common data and information so that we can get this comparability across time and across space. For me, it's really about more collaboration, interdisciplinary research collaboration as well, because some of these basic measures can actually be taken by researchers, whether they're working on one topic or another. And I think actually peatlands, because of the small, sort of like relatively small space that they cover, they're a great spot for this sort of cracking the nut on research and emissions. And I think that we do see, as the Global Peatlands Initiative, a huge amount of publications coming in internationally. One of them I shared actually with Peter after this challenging conversation about methane and, you know, this impactful but short-lived climate pollutant and greenhouse gas, and then CO2, which has a longer impact. And I think that that's really what we need to do. The great thing about working in developed countries is that you have a longer term plan. There is that more stability. So I think that looking on a longer term horizon of planning is really quite vital. And I hope that we can get research collaboration in the UK even more strengthened and enabled through the partnership. Thanks.
Thanks, Dianna. Ashton, maybe come to you. There's a couple of questions come forward around CBD targets, and you mentioned that a couple of times in your presentation. And I just kind of wonder whether you had a view on whether, as a peatland community, we need to be doing more to specifically kind of highlight the opportunities for nature-based solutions for peatlands around the CBD in particular, and whether you've got a view, whether you kind of feel that job's already done, or whether there's more work to be done.
I wish that the job was done. Now, there's a lot more work to be done in promoting the value of nature-based solutions. It's just a term. It's the concepts that it sort of represents that are the important elements, and I think those concepts need, there needs to be a lot more work in integrating those concepts into not just the CBD but UNFCCC, and then the overlaps between those conventions. We can't do just one convention. We will need all those conventions working together to get a meaningful result, or at least one that enables us to meet our biodiversity and climate targets.
Thanks, Ashton. I'll stick with you, Ashton, if that's okay, and I'll work backwards through Dianna and Peter. We had a question in around COP26, and it's more of a statement actually that we could do more to bring the role of peatlands to the fore at COP26. I don't know whether BirdLIFE International have got any plans to do that, but if you were given the opportunity, what would you kind of like to showcase, if you like, to the world's leaders at COP26 around peatlands?
I think initially forests were the main system that was discussed at the UNFCCC, at least within the Climate Action Network that I'm most involved with. We've been doing some work trying to ensure that people include all ecosystems within that discussion. That includes peatlands, oceans, coastal wetlands, etc., and other ecosystems. So I think that there's a lot of good work to be done to ensure that biodiversity, the importance of biodiversity within all those ecosystems is considered. I think a lot of the current, or at least the status quo of policy work around climate change has not focused on biodiversity as being a meaningful contribution. And I think there's a lot of work to do to bring biodiversity very securely and strongly into that discussion around mitigation and adaptation, and the importance of intact, high integrity ecosystems and the value they have towards all those things that I've mentioned.
Okay, I'll just move over to Dianna. Same question to you, Dianna. And I know we've had a bit of a conversation around opportunities for the IUCN Peatland programme to work with the GPI at COP26. But in your kind of experience, but what do you think works with world leaders? Is it inspiration or is it hard science?
Honestly, it's not the hardest science. I've met some ministers and decision makers that, they might be up at the blackjack table, like they're some are risk takers. So how certain do we need to be the science? We need to offer the best science. That's definite. But I think, this is an emergency we're talking about. We have an opportunity. Peatlands cover only 3% of the global land surface area, but they are emitting at least 5% of human activity. And when they're on fire, that goes up to 10%. So let's talk about fires as well. Really, we need to put peatlands on the agenda. But to get on that agenda, we need to have numbers. And we need to have also estimations of the benefit of peatlands restoration, for example, and also their protection. So we're actually, as the Global Peatlands Initiative and UNEP, working on a peatlands economics paper, which I mentioned. We really want to put peatlands economics at the table at the COP. We also have been having, and we'll base a lot of that peatlands economics work around the group of economics researchers, including those from Scotland, that have published some great numbers on peatlands restoration. It's not all there, but what we do need to provide is an opportunity for decision makers to choose peatlands conservation and action. And I think that, you know, we're all learning with the COVID situation that actually we need nature, and we better start to respect it. So along with restoration, we really need to stop thinking so deeply about commoditization, and we really need to value nature in its pristine state. But for that, we need numbers and we need economists. So we're working closely with them, and we really hope to offer an opportunity either to highlight peatlands through an entire peatlands nature-based solution stream at the COP, or a peatlands dedicated pavilion. And if you're interested in lobbying for that, we're really happy to work together with the IUCN UK Peatlands program and other interested parties like Scotland and Germany that could be interested in joining forces. Indonesia is definitely happy to also contribute, as well as other countries like Chile and Argentina, and Peru, who are making some headway with their work on peatlands strategies. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Diana. And that it is an amazing opportunity, and one which I think the UK and Scotland in particular has to kind of seize this opportunity of showcasing, I think, the amazing work and achievements and knowledge that we've already generated in this country, but the fact that we're also kind of connected out through this global network, and this kind of almost unique opportunity, I think, to showcase the value of peatlands at the top. We just got to seize the opportunity, and as your video there, Diana, kind of ably demonstrated, there's so much kind of beauty and inspiration, I think, as well in our peatlands, and possibly in a surprising way, I think, to most people who are maybe kind of not familiar with these places. Peter, if I could kind of slightly rework the question for you. Diana's talked about the value and the need to be able to share the knowledge as well as the inspiration. I think our delegates would be interested to know how much international collaboration you've been having with both the kind of understanding and sharing what you've actually learned through this process over the years.
Okay, yeah, an interesting question given the current geopolitical situation of the UK, but we have been working quite closely up until the end of January with the European Commission to make them aware of the work which we've done in this space. You may all be aware the UK was the only country to elect wetland drainage and rewetting in the second commitment period, and therefore the only country that was required to implement the wetland supplement from the IPCC. That meant we've learned some lessons that are of value to others with similar climates and conditions to us. So we've shared the reports with and learnings with Ireland and Denmark and Germany and the European Commission. And while we were no longer allowed to attend Commission meetings after the end of January, sensibly enough, nothing to do with us, I think scientists from the UK have been invited over there to talk through the findings to enable that knowledge transfer to take place. So I think to those to whom they're relevant, and clearly there's different climates around Europe and globally to which our learnings won't apply, then I think we've done a reasonable job. I'm always happy to reach out to others. The other thing, of course, is the ongoing research we clearly haven't transmitted, and perhaps we need to tell others what we're up to there, because I haven't really thought of doing that, I must admit. So thanks, interesting.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to all of our speakers for their time and the information that they've shared with us. I'm sorry I didn't get through all of your questions, but we have run out of time now. We'll find a way of being able to respond to some of these questions. We've had questions in here about kind of paleo peatlands in the Arctic, and competing priorities in terms of restocking of woodland on peatlands up to 50 centimetres, and some technical questions as well around emissions. So I don't want to lose sight of those, so we'll find a way of being able to kind of respond to those in due course if we can. So thanks again, speakers, and our next session starts at 3:20, which is effectively the kind of second aspect of this kind of international and wider context discussion. Thank you, everybody.